Hey everybody, John Raritan here for Nintendo World Report TV. We are going to take a look at Starlink, particularly the Switch version of Starlink, which was not announced at this year's E3, but hyped up quite a bit with the addition of Star Fox content. I've seen online some people commenting that the Switch version doesn't run very well, so we want to see if there's any truth to that. Looking at frame rates here, and the menus, of course, we're going to see better frame rates, looking at about 50 frames per second in these menus fairly consistently. Once we get into actual gameplay, we're looking at a 30 frame per second game. Now the good news is that it does this fairly well. It's important to keep in mind that this game is not final code. This doesn't come out until October, so we're not seeing final code of the game. Things can change. But what we're seeing here is not bad at all. As we approach this planet, which we do without any discernible loading screen, similar to something like No Man's Sky, frame rate actually holds pretty steady. We get a few drops down to about 27 frames per second, but nothing horrible. Even as we scoot along closer to the surface here, we still manage to maintain pretty high frame rates. Once again, 27 frames per second is about as low as we get. We do see a lower drop when we activate that boost. It seems that the alpha effect of the boost, in fact alpha effects in general, seem to affect this game quite a bit. Now speaking of alpha effects, as we get into this area, which is not only combat, but combat clouded in a bunch of haze, that's where we start to run into problems. Here we're going to see pretty regular dips down to about 25 frames per second. Now that's by no means unplayable, but you are going to notice a 25 frame per second drop. So these extractor nodes are shooting out rings of fire, and every time it does that, we've dropped down quite a bit. Occasionally, when we get a really big explosion, we can drop down to 24. I think the lowest frame I ever saw was 21 frames per second. Once again, big explosions, really drop it down. Based on the demo so far, this is sort of our worst case scenario that we've seen. Once we get out of that area and back to exploring the planet, you get a big, gorgeous view like this at a pretty consistent 30 frames per second. Once again, if we get close to some really big geometry, we'll see a slight drop to 28, 27 frames per second, but nothing big. And even as we approach this big boss, we don't see any significant drops. When you're fighting this guy, where you don't have that big fog effect going on, and all those like rings of fire and all that, we stay pretty close to 30 frames per second. Granted, we do also have the advantage when fighting this guy, because he's so tall, we spend a lot of time looking up, so we have a lot more of the sky in view. But even when we do pan the camera down, we're still getting pretty consistent frame rates. Nothing like we were seeing in that first bit of combat. So it looks like that is sort of a isolated problem there, and maybe not the best idea to demo at E3 for the game. But in general, this game seems to be running perfectly fine on Switch. Sure, there's room for improvement, but we're also pretty far out from the release. So I think we could see something really great by the time it comes out. This is definitely a game that I'm following and I'm excited for. So we'll just have to see how the final game holds up once we actually see that code. There's plenty more Starlink footage, including all the footage you're seeing here without that annoying little frame time graph over the top of it, which you can watch right here on NWR TV. Lots of other E3 coverage as well to check out. You can also check out NintendoWorldReport.com for a whole lot more. And if you want to support both this channel and the site, you can check us out at patreon.com/NWR.